King Groy, how you doing, man? What's up, man? Long time no see. Doing great. Good to hear from you on your day off.
Yeah, we were supposed to connect yesterday, but I fell asleep. So, but what's up?
Not much.
Hey, wait a second. Is that red?
You can wear red, Nick. It's not pure red. And at the time of the prophet, they were trying to make a distinction because the enemies were wearing all red. So you weren't supposed to dress like the enemies were wearing all red. But as long as it's mixed colors, if you have red and there's another color, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just checking.
5 minutes, not even 30 seconds in, I'm getting haram policed.
I'm just kidding. It's okay. I know. We like the color red.
I saw, did you see a clip from Klav? He's like, I love seeing Nick and Sneako go back and forth. It's super funny. You know, there's been lots of clips. And I appreciate you taking this call because Osmongold, for example, he said a couple days ago he'd consider talking to me and just communicating through clips. I think when you have disagreements with somebody, we have a lot of more agreements than disagreements, I think. So maybe it's important to talk about this stuff. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. The back and forth is it's kind of funny because we're just clip farming each other on each other's streams. So we might as well just do it, just sit down and do it.
Yeah, so let's start with some of the points of contention, right? We agree that Goyim should unite, but there are some, you tweeted 2 days ago saying, liberal, and my point of view is that it's not really about left and right. I do want to work with you and not have JD Vance win because the GOP has made so many mistakes. And I agree. I'm not a Newsom supporter, but I think it makes sense that they are punished for their blatant lying. And, Newsom, although maybe he's saying this for a populist movement, he's saying some things that I agree with. He's saying that Israel's an apartheid state, and he doesn't seem to be in agreement with this war. So I will unite on that and support you there.
Yeah, I mean, my playbook, though, I do want a Republican to win in 28. I just don't want it to be J.D. Vance or anyone from the admin. Kind of the structure of it for me, very simply, is I want Democrats to win in 26 for the only reason being that they are going to slow down the administration because the administration's out of control. They're at war with Iran. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility they drop a nuke on Iran or, something crazy like that, boots on the ground. And so I want that to stop. I want the Epstein files delivered and, all this other stuff. There's also just a lot of stealing. There's a lot of embezzlement, a lot of corruption inside this government. Kristi Noem was basically fired because that is going to become a big problem. There was a big thing in the Wall Street Journal about how, I don't know what exactly it is, but there was some $200 million payment and she's involved with one of the contractors that's going to be building the wall, something like that. And I think that he let her go because that's going to be maybe an issue if the Democrats have oversight. So I want the Democrats in purely because they're going to grind this admin to a halt. In 28, though, the goal is I want Vance and Hegseth and anybody that's in the admin to go down with the ship so they can't win. And I want a Republican to win, but a good one.
And the distinction that I want to make is the difference between people like Hegseth and Trump. I saw you talked about how I spoke about the pastor putting his hands on Trump and they're all kind of praying on him. And I think that the evangelical Christians that are saying the Bible says God must bless those who bless the state of Israel, it makes no sense, and I don't see that as any part of Christianity. And, I come from a Catholic background. I grew up Catholic, and it seems like the Catholics and Orthodox understand that rebuilding the third temple is not a part of Christianity. I saw Tucker do a really good deep dive on the Chabad sect of Judaism and what this war could potentially really be about. And so there's a clear separation that I think needs to be made between Catholic Christians, Orthodox Christians, and these warmongering evangelicals. I'm sure you've seen the report of soldiers that were told, and they're complaining that Hegseth was saying Jesus was anointing Trump and shining a light on him to protect Israel and to bomb Iran. So they're trying to turn this into some Armageddon holy war. Hegseth has these crusade tattoos on him. He has the Kafir tattoo, which we believe is going to be written on the forehead of the Antichrist. Hegseth is not like, or anything that he's doing is not Christ-like at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only issue is I see Judaism and Jews as the source of evangelical Protestantism, or not even. You could get into that. You could go into like where that comes from, the Masoretic texts and things like that. But I mean, in terms of the dispensationalist theology, this whole idea that those that bless Israel will be blessed, I look at that as basically an outgrowth of organized Jewry. And so I guess I just don't like when it always goes back to, Muslims versus Christians. They say Muslims are backward, but Christians are backward too. They say Muslims do this, but Christians do it too. Christians are decadent and degenerate. Muslims are holy. And if it's going to be Goyim Unite, then we got to train the target on Israel, because they really are the ones. Obviously, they're using the Christians to bomb the Muslims. And the more that we lean into the antagonism between Christians and Muslims, the more we play into that. So, especially since I know before the war in Iran started, there was a little bit more contentiousness, but especially since the war in Iran started, we have to really make a concerted effort not to get caught up in that. Because like in New York, I'm sure you saw that Jake Lang guy, that Jewish guy, is out there antagonizing everybody, saying, oh, Muslims are goat fuckers and blah, blah, blah. And someone threw a nail bomb at him. And obviously, Muslims maybe are prone to do things like that or whatever, but it's like that he's inciting that and antagonizing them to get that response because he's a Jew. He wants Christians and Muslims to fight. He wants to provoke an attack, some kind of racially charged incident, so that there is maybe more public support for boots on the ground in Iran. And so people like you and I have to come together and say, no, nobody wants this war. Not Muslims, not Christians. It almost needs to be a little bit, you could say, even irrational. Like we have to really strive to overcome. Because like I said, even just now, it's like, did maybe some punk like counter protester try to attack this guy? I think that's possible, but you almost have to say like, okay, but they're playing, that guy is playing into their hands. Both Jake Lang and the guy that made the nail bomb, they're both playing into this thing. And people like you and I have to really make an effort to resist that and overcome that, even if it's a little irrational.
Yeah, staying away from that division. And I mean, there's an equal possibility that this was a setup, that this was part of the plan, that maybe this was somebody hired. But also, blaming this guy, if he was throwing a nail bomb on all Muslims, is as ridiculous as blaming Pete Hegseth's warmongering hatred on all Christians, right? Because Protestant Christians dominate America. They are the majority sect of Christianity in America. And these evangelicals are the ones that dominate the White House and dominate D.C. right now. It's not Catholics and Protestants. The majority of people around Trump, they are with these pastors, and the same pastor putting his hand on Trump, she's the one saying, the angels are coming, the angels are coming. This stuff is, it's just it's completely ridiculous. And my point is that they're using Christianity, and it's false Christianity. They're using it to justify this war. So I want to see a complete separation. The same way that if there's a guy throwing a nail bomb, this is not representative of Islam.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose it isn't. Okay.
But you see what I'm saying? But I mean, look, so if this nail bomb is representative of Islam, then why can't we say, and I don't think it's true, why can't we say, look, if America's a majority Christian country, majority is Protestant, majority is evangelical.
But see, we're doing it. They got us doing it. Now we're doing it.
My point is that we shouldn't use these as examples to attack the entire religion. It's not representative of what it is.
Okay, I'm not doing that. But see, now we're doing it. Why are we talking about this now and not? Let's just say all we need to say about it is this. This incident was a deliberate provocation. A Jew pretending to be a Christian. Maybe the guy's a Muslim. We don't even know who he is. I'm willing to believe he's not a Muslim, let's say. But he's clearly some kind of partisan or an operative. Either way, these two people, there's almost a symbiotic relationship between, even if it is a Muslim who is whipped up by the moment, angry, low IQ, whatever, a guy that would do something like that, he is becoming an unwitting pawn in the game. A Jew pretending to be a Christian, antagonizing some Muslim who's maybe a punk or whatever, or an operative. And they together are creating an incident that will galvanize everybody, because it's like, look, the Jewish guy, Jake Lang, he goes into New York, trying to offend Muslims. And the Muslims are saying, hey, what the F? This is outrageous. He brought it to Zohran Mamdani. He did a pig roast outside of Zohran Mamdani's mansion. And Muslims are saying, well, we're being provoked. We're angry. Surely many of them see what's going on. Maybe some of them don't. And the same is happening with Christians. This guy's going and provoking, and a lot of Christians say, this guy's deliberately antagonizing Muslims. He's trying to incite violence. There's a lot of Christians that don't know, and they say, oh, yeah, let's stick it to him. Oh, look, a Muslim did a nail bomb attack. That's so whatever. So people like you and I, like I said, we just have to really make an effort to isolate the problem makers and say, look, what we don't want, we are in a war with Iran. Forget about these protests and counter-protests, a scuffle in New York. We're at war with Iran. This is apocalyptic. Everybody needs to be really just focused on that. That's sort of my point.
Yeah, the main focus needs to be on the overwhelming Israeli control, right? The Jewish supremacists that have convinced Trump that, Jesus anointed him with a light, Hegseth in the Holy War, and, Ted Cruz, that interview with Tucker was so telling, citing this. And even that verse can be misinterpreted. People are saying that he's not actually saying Israel, he's saying it was the son of Abraham, but they're using that semantic error or misunderstanding to say that, it's actually the state of Israel that was founded in 1948 by the Rothschild family. That I want to see more people call that out, because that's the justification they're using for this war. And I saw there was a lot of outrage, and of course we have a disagreement about the Times Square prayer, but that is a clear example of how people get whipped up and angry about something so insignificant, right? 200 people praying in Times Square. The next day, Jews take over Times Square and they broadcast all over the TV stations they're doing a Mashiach now, they're doing a rave party, jumping up and down with far more people, far more police. Even in Lakewood, New Jersey, they have their own police, they have their own hospitals. A good example is how angry they got about Somali daycares. And you see Tyler Oliveira gets banned on Patreon for exposing a scam that is much bigger, right? So I see all this outrage on Times Square prayer, but almost no talk about the Antichrist celebration. Because what we agree upon, Catholic Christians, Orthodox Christians, is that the Antichrist is the Dajjal. We have an agreement that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus will return. And so many of these people have manipulated and changed it and directed the outrage onto Muslims and getting people whipped up about, the Islamic takeover of America, even though look at what Muslims are 1% of the population, this is a clear tactic to dehumanize Muslims so that when bombs do drop on Tehran, they killed 170 schoolgirls. They reported 1,000 civilian casualties in Tehran. It's so that Americans see this and they think it's something that's cool, like a Call of Duty game. I'm sure you've seen the White House edits where they're playing like football tackles and then a bomb. They're hitting a baseball and then a bomb's going off. This is tricking so many boomer Americans, and no disrespect, a lot of them probably do go to those Erica Kirk, Kenneth Copeland type megachurch celebrations where even another Trump pastor with the giant sign that says Epic Fury behind him, and they're thinking that this is part of a greater holy cause. So I want people to stop falling for the obvious rage bait directed on Muslims when we should understand who is actually taking over our country.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's almost surreal to see how much the anti-Muslim thing is now at the fore, because it went away for a long time. I remember that when Trump got elected the first time in 2017, or got inaugurated, ISIS took over the Middle East, and there were ISIS terror attacks in the United States and Europe. And so Islam was very much at the center of the conversation. And then, almost mysteriously, it disappeared. ISIS just vanished into thin air. It seemed like for 4 years they were unstoppable and there were terror attacks all the time. And then almost overnight, it's like a switch was flipped. Then there was no more terrorism. And then that issue faded into the background, and we became preoccupied with Russia and China and the pandemic and BLM and immigration, basically every other issue. And then basically right on schedule, it's amazing how this happens. After October 7th, all of a sudden it's like, oh, Islam is taking over America. Oh, Muslim terrorists. I saw today, my old colleague, now enemy, Patrick Casey, he did this video about how Tucker Carlson is smuggling Islam into right-wing conservatism. Now, for context, this is a guy who I knew many years ago who was like a white nationalist. And he was a so-called dissident right-winger, far-right, activist, whatever you want to say. And we would have looked at that kind of rhetoric as propaganda. We would say, oh, no one's trying to smuggle Islam into the right wing. We would say that's Jewish propaganda. We would say they're obviously trying to create this, they're fear-mongering and create this spook so that it would generate anti-Iranian, anti-Hamas, whatever the particular enemy is, it would gin up support for war. And now to see basically all the dissident right-wingers kind of taking the bait on this. They're all doing it, and they're now saying, oh, yeah, it's Islam. They all sound like Laura Loomer. They all sound like Mark Levin. And, I've said it on my show, as a Catholic and as a American nationalist, I don't think America's a Muslim nation. I don't want tons of Muslims to live here. Those are my views. At the same time, you also recognize that that's actually not the biggest problem. The big problem, as we've talked about with immigration, it's coming from Latin America and Asia. Yep. That's the illegal immigration. That's illegal immigration. The Muslim immigration is mostly refugees from the wars, which, and then, beyond that, it's like, what's a bigger problem than immigration? That we are being sent to kill and die on behalf of a foreign country. I think that sovereignty is actually the number one issue. So as long as we can achieve understanding on that basis, we don't need to, like, obviously there's a discourse between Christians and Muslims, and we don't agree on everything, and there is some friction and some tension there. We don't need to be best good friends on that basis, but we can have understanding that we're being played and that we both actually have a larger opponent.
I agree completely. And I do think that Catholics and Orthodox Christians have far more in common with Muslims than they do with this evangelical sect that seems to think that war is necessary and war is holy as part of this bigger issue. I would want to see more of a distinction there between so many of the good Christians that are, because, Gen Z Americans, and you deserve a lot of credit for this, but there's been a big awakening. Far more people in Gen Z, they're not drinking alcohol, and also there's a big return to the church, which I think is good. You see how publicly backed James Fishback, he's a Catholic, he has a very strong Gen Z support, but what he's losing is the boomers. The boomers are still eating up that goy slop propaganda about, how Muslims are evil and they attend megachurch, but predominantly from Gen Z, the youth, they see straight up what's going on, and they're not falling victim to it. So again, I don't know if you agree, but I think, people like Hegseth, they have far more in common with Jews, and people like you, I think Catholics and Orthodox Christians have far more in common with Muslims.
Well, I mean, we're the thing is, at the end of the day, we are three distinct religions: Jews, Christians, Muslims, and I want America to be a Christian country. So it's not necessarily,
Go ahead.
Yeah. It's more that at this point in time, we almost need like a ceasefire, basically, because we are in a state of conflict. Like, Muslims and Christians are in basically a ceaseless state of conflict because they're two competing claims. And we can't pretend that's not the case. I mean, if Muslims take over a country, like let's say for the sake of argument that Muslims outnumber Christians, they're going to want Sharia law, and they're going to want non-Christians to pay a tax. And if Christians take over a country, like if we're in control of America or whatever, Christians are not going to take a shine to a Muslim call to prayer in the middle of a town, because we're going to say that's not the correct religion. So it doesn't help to paper over the differences and say, hey, it's all fine, because eventually something's got to give. It's just that for right now, in this particular time, specifically right now in this war with Iran, we almost just need like a truce and a ceasefire to say, look, like, we can resume the dawah versus the evangelizing another day, because right now these people are trying to rebuild the third temple by blowing up the Dome on the Rock and destroying Iran and getting everybody out of Gaza. And that's going to fuck with everybody, because where are the Gazans going to go? Where are the Iranians going to go? They're going to go Europe, here. That's something we don't want. And they want to stay there. That's something that as Muslims they want. And so that's sort of the framework that we need. It's very important, because if we kind of have a shoddy framework where we say, oh, Christians and Muslims have all these things in common, and Muslims are great, and Christians are great. Like, you can't really say Christians are the best because you're Muslim, and I can't really say, Islam is fine because I'm Christian. But what we can say is, right now, the biggest threat to both of us is not each other. So if we're sober-minded about that, it will be easier, I think, to work together.
Right, and that's part of the eschatology. There's videos of rabbis saying that they need to have Christians and Muslims at war to destroy Europe so that they can take over the world. And I should probably cut YouTube here. YouTube, I'm going to end. Come on over to kick.com/Sneako. It's the link right there in the chat. Okay, came over just now. You don't watch on YouTube, right? You just stay on my Kick stream.